Hey guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue on with our read-along of Erha. Let's jump right in. Chapter 118. Shizun sometimes falls for tricks too. Moran had a shadow. He wasn't dead? A medley of details flashed through Rongju's mind. The shock would have sent a chill through him, followed by a rush of hot blood to his head to scramble his thoughts into utter disarray if he wasn't already dead. Rongju stood there frozen in place for a while. How a person reacted to major happenings often had to do with their usual circumstances. For instance, some people were habitually jumpy from past experiences and would get scared stiff at the first sign of something unexpected. And then there were people like the darling of the heavens, Xuemeng, self-possessed and unruffled, unfazed by just about everything. As for someone like Rongju, who had lived in the mud all his life and suffered all kinds of hardships, his first thought in the face of an unexpected turn of events was, does it pose a threat to him? And if not, how to benefit from it? He quickly realized that Moran was a living person who had snuck into the underworld, and that he himself stood to gain much from this knowledge. All he had to do was expose Moran, and he would have done the underworld a great service. That would surely land him in some kind of official position, and then he'd be able to strut about with his chest puffed out. So what if he had sold his body and life? If he could just seize this opportunity, he could go up in the world in death, as men ought to. It was practically handed to him on a silver platter. Why bother with reincarnation then? This would offer him a comfortable life right away, a complete turnaround, allowing him to erase all past disgrace and start over anew. Peach Blossom eyes narrowed subtly, something flickering within. Rongju could already see himself being bestowed positions of import and titles of nobility, could see himself sitting behind draping silks on a bamboo sedan chair like those officials of the underworld, a picture of composure as he was carried through a gathering of ghosts. Rongju felt more relieved the more he thought about it, but there was a problem. He was weak and delicate. There was no way he was going to be able to sneak off from right under Moran's nose to go tell on him. He had to figure out some way to keep Moran occupied. As the gears in his head turned, his gaze landed on the red-robed Chuaning. Chu Xianjun, Rongju greeted as he took a seat next to Chuaning with his cheek propped in hand. But Chuaning only continued probing at the barrier without so much as a sound of acknowledgement, so cold there was practically a layer of frost on his closed eyelashes. Still nothing? Rongju tried. A few moments passed. Chuaning still did not reply, but also did not chase him away, so Rongju sat there and chattered absently about this and that, as if to himself, and then muttered in a soft voice, Chu Xianjun, to tell you the truth, I wasn't completely honest with you earlier. There's something... I was afraid that you'd look down on me if you knew, that you wouldn't pity me and take me with you anymore. Chuaning's pitch-black brows were tightly furrowed, and though he had yet to speak, there was a flame of anger there, burning between his brows. It was just that he was still holding it down, restraining himself from letting it out. But how could Rongju possibly miss its flickering light? Rongju said in his soft, delicate voice, I was thinking about it just now while I was outside, and I feel really terrible about lying to Xianjun, so I wanted to come say sorry. As luck would have it, his opener just so happened to match Moran's, both of them wanting to say sorry. Chuaning wasn't even that repulsed at first, but when those words left Rongju's lips, he finally slowly opened his eyes, and, without looking at Rongju, asked in a frosty tone, Which brothel did you work at when you were alive? Rongju was caught off guard. Xianjun already knew? He unconsciously stole a glance toward Moran and swore to himself, that guy actually came clean on his own instead of trying to keep it from Chuaning. Would it be enough for him to fan the flames like this? Mo Xianjun and I... Chuaning cut him off before he could even finish. I said, which brothel did you work at when you were alive? Rongju bit his lip. The Immortal Peach Pavilion in Black Bamboo Town. Immortal Peach Pavilion. Chuaning repeated it back with a wry tug of his lips before falling silent again, a terrifying expression on his face. Rongju snuck several glances at him, pursed his lips, and tried tentatively, Chu Xianjun, you wouldn't look down on me, would you? Chuaning, ... I lived a hard life and had a feeble body, and got sold to the brothel at a young age. If only I had choice. Of course, I would have wanted to be a demon-slaying hero like Xianjun too, Rongju said with a sigh, muttering wistfully. It'd be wonderful if, in my next life, I could become someone outstanding like Xianjun too. Reincarnation won't change the nature of the soul, Chuaning said impassively. Condolences, but you and I belong to different walks of life. Having been shut down like this, Rongju's smile didn't even falter as he said, I know I could never compare with Xianjun. It was only a wishful thought. For people like us, if we don't give ourselves something to hope for, a dream to cling to, we wouldn't last a year in the brothels before thinking about how to end it all. When Chuaning didn't respond, Rongju glanced toward Moran out of the corner of his eye, checking to make sure that he couldn't hear their little chat, before continuing with a soft sigh. After all, the guests at the brothel were usually cruel and callous, and hardly even saw us as human. In that place, being visited by a kindly guest like Mo Xianjun was something to be envied. Chuaning remained silent, but the vein stood out on the back of his hand that was pressed against the wall. If he had his powers right now, there would probably be 5 holes in that wall already. A moment passed during which he tried and failed to hold it back. Finally, he uttered in a dark, low voice, What is there to be envious of? A thread of affection appeared on Rongju's gentle, lovely face. Not too much and not too little, just the right amount. Because Mo Xianjun is a good person, of course. Although he acted up and stole from me in the end, it was probably because I didn't serve him well enough in the past. He always used to be such a reasonable, charming person before. Chuaning's face was cold and impassive as he listened without a word. Everyone who's ever served him at my place talked about how good and kind he was, and lots of us were always hoping for him to come back. Did he go often? Rongju feigned a dry laugh. How often is often? I'm not quite sure how to answer Xianjun's question. Then, tell me how regularly he went, whom he asked for, and when his last visit was. Those thin lips were like a pair of knives, and each question glinted with a cold, dangerous light like they were out for Moran's life. Rongju pretended not to notice the frosty light in Chuaning's eyes, embellishing and exacerbating as he answered. I didn't really keep track of how regularly he went, but I always saw him around for at least 10 of the 30 days each month, if not more. As for whom he asked for, it varied. Sigh, Chu Xianjun, it's all in the past already, so don't blame him anymore. I asked when his last visit was. Chuaning's face was practically a thick layer of ice. Answer the question. In actuality, Moran had never gone back to see Rongju again after that day he'd been reborn, nor had he gone to any other brothel after that. But, looking at Chuaning's expression, Rongju knew he couldn't speak the truth, so he feigned uncertainty and fanned the flames even more. Not sure about that, but I do remember seeing Mo Xianjun in the brothel now and again, up to when I died, so probably around then. He had barely finished speaking when Chuaning stood up abruptly, hand pulling back from the wall, wide sleeve falling over slender fingers. In the hazy darkness, sparks blazed in his eyes as his entire body trembled minutely. Rongju was secretly delighted, thinking this girl-less Xianjun really was easy to fool. He was a prostitute, a veteran in the arena of love affairs, an expert at reading other people's feelings. Baiting someone all virtuous and upright like Chuaning was a piece of cake for him, hook, line, and sinker. Rongju pulled out the nervous expression he already had prepared as he said in a hurry, Chu Xianjun, what is it? Did I say something wrong? It's all misdeeds of a previous lifetime now, so please don't blame Mo Xianjun anymore. He's not a bad person. Like I need you to tell me if he's a bad person or not, Chuaning snapped, so angry he was shaking. And what business of yours is it that I want to teach my own disciple a lesson? Chu Xianjun! Chuaning completely ignored him. There was a chill coming off his gaze, even as sparks flew off the rage blazing in his eyes. He shoved Rongju aside from where he was trying to block his way and strode over to the door of the storehouse, grabbed Moran by the back of his collar, and yanked him to his feet. Moran looked back, startled. Shizun! Chuaning pulled his hand back, as if even the collar of his robes was too filthy to touch. He stared Moran down like a cheetah on the hunt, growling lowly and just about to pounce, but he was much too angry to speak, even after a long moment had passed. What even was there to say anymore? If Moran hadn't realized his wrongs even after being reprimanded on the platform of sin and virtue, if he had already apologized and had been acting like a decent human being in front of himself all this time, but was actually still sneaking around to this peach parting pavilion and that cut-sleeve lodge to fool around with prostitutes, Moran had no idea why he was being slandered, or that he had been being slandered. All he saw was the darkness on Chuaning's face, his expression a mixture of anger and revulsion, and he wasn't sure if he was seeing things, a layer of stifled sadness. Mo Wei Yu, just how much of your words in the past were true, and how many were lies? Chuaning's voice was hoarse, and his eyelashes quivered. A while passed, then he said in a low voice, You really are deficient by nature, beyond remedy. Those words were like a boulder crashing into the ocean, sweeping up a massive wave in its wake. Moran jolted violently. He took 2 steps back, shaking his head as he stared at him in a loss. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. Those were the words that Chuaning had only spoken to him in the past life when he'd lost all hope in him. Why would he say it now? Wasn't everything going fine? Moran flew into a panic, not knowing what had happened. He was about to speak when Chuaning cut him off, the rims of his eyes reddening as anger blazed in his gaze like a wildfire. He said, voice raw, Just how much longer are you going to lie to me? Moran's mind was utter chaos. What lie? What had Chuaning found out? He had too many dirty, unspeakable secrets. Thus, faced with Chuaning's terrifying glare, he didn't even think to suspect that it was because Rongju had done something. Chuaning stepped closer. Mo Wei Yu backed off, kept backing off until his back hit the wall. Chuaning came to a stop. A few moments passed in silence as he stared at Moran's face. Moran heard a tightness in his Shizun's voice, like he was choking back a sob. Why do you even want me to go back for? For you to keep lying to me, angering me, leading me around by the nose? I thought you had changed. I thought you had turned over a new leaf, Moran. I thought you were worth teaching, that you had changed for the better. I thought I could teach you to be good. He closed his eyes slowly, and a moment later spoke in a quiet voice. Incorrigible. Shizun! Get lost. ... Which part of get lost do you not understand? Chuaning's eyes flew open, his gaze frosty. Mo Wei Yu, you disappoint me. How do you expect me to pretend like I don't know anything, to go back to the world of the living with you? Moran's entire heart clenched. Heedless of his anger, he grabbed Chuaning's wrist within his billowing sleeve and shook his head, begging with teary, reddening eyes. Shizun, please don't be angry. Tell me what happened, okay? Whatever I did wrong again, I'll change, okay? Just please don't chase me off. Change? That's what he had said back then too, and did he? If not for meeting Rongju here, would Chuaning have ever found out about these unseemly things? It is said that concern makes a person rash. Chuaning was usually calm and collected, but he had a fiery disposition and acted on emotion in matters of the heart. And on top of that, the past relationship between Rongju and Moran had indeed been improper, and Rongju had put on such a convincing performance, so Chuaning fell for it completely. Unable to pull free from Moran's grip, Chuaning lifted his other hand to summon Tianwen in a fit of anger, but of course nothing appeared. He was mad enough to keel over. Probably would have spit blood by now if he wasn't already dead. And then there was suddenly a brilliant scarlet radiance as Moran summoned Jengoi. He put Jengoi into Chuaning's hand and then knelt down before his Shizun, keeping his other hand wrapped firmly around Chuaning's wrist the whole time, deathly scared that he might leave. Moran said, Shizun, I know I've done lots of things that made you angry and upset in the past, but since coming down to the underworld, everything I've said to you has been true. He lifted his head, eyes brimming with tears as he looked up at him. All of it was true. I didn't lie to you. Clenching Jengoi in his hand, Chuaning's heart burned with rage, but also felt pained at the same time. Moran's hand was wrapped so tightly around his own, trembling uncontrollably, despairingly, but refusing to let go, his agony so palpable that it nearly seemed to pierce into the depth of Chuaning's very soul. How could he possibly not feel it? Moran continued, If Shizun is upset, if Shizun doesn't want to forgive me, then please just hit me, yell at me, anything is fine, and if you really don't want to see me again, if you think I'm deficient by nature beyond remedy. His voice broke on that phrase. Moran lowered his head where he knelt before Chuaning. If Shizun really doesn't want me anymore... He didn't want Chuaning to see him cry, but he couldn't stop the shaking of his shoulders as silent tears soaked a dark patch into the ground. Then I'll leave Sishong Peak and never show myself in front of Shizun again. But please, I'm begging you. His forehead was nearly touching the muddy ground where he was kneeling, but his hand around Chuaning's wrist was still hanging on so tightly, so stubbornly, as if he'd sooner die than let go. Please don't leave. ... Shizun. Chuaning closed his eyes. You promised me you'd go back with me, so please don't leave. There was an aching in his chest. He was only a fragment of a soul, so how could it still seem like his heart was being stabbed by knives, burnt by flames? Chuaning's eyes snapped open in anger and resentment. I promised you. Then what about what you promised me? Back at the platform of sin and virtue, you said you'd realized your wrongs, and then kneeling at Clear Sky Hall, you said you'd never do it again. So why didn't you keep your word, Mo Wei Yu? Did you really think I'd never find out, that I wouldn't discipline you again? Huh? Moran startled, lost and confused like he was stuck in a foggy haze. He raised his head and looked up through teary eyes. What? The word barely had time to leave his lips when Jengoi flashed bright scarlet and lashed out viciously toward the side of his face. Instantly, there was an eruption of crackling sparks, and blood splattered onto the ground and wall in an arc. Chuaning really was furious. He hadn't held back at all in that strike. A bloody gash appeared on the side of Moran's face, bleeding profusely. But he paid it no mind as he clutched at Chuaning's hand, asking with wide eyes, What do you mean, platform of sin and virtue? What Clear Sky Hall? What am I keeping from you? What am I lying to you about? His string of questions only made Chuaning even more incensed. He tried to shake him off again, but couldn't. Moran suddenly realized that something was off. He whipped his head around to look back toward the inside of the storehouse. While the two of them were fighting and far too distracted to notice anything else, that wrong Jew had snuck away and ran off. Moran's expression changed as he immediately realized what was happening. Shizun, we fell for his trap! Come on, we have to leave! It's not safe here anymore, hurry! He ran for the door, pulling Chuaning along, but they barely made it 2 steps out when Rongju appeared in the distance with a group of ghost soldiers, still tattling. They're right this way, that living person and the soul that's with him, the 2 of them! Moran roared furiously, I should have killed you! There was no time to explain. Moran led the way, holding tightly onto Chuaning's hand as they ran through streets and alleys. There were more and more pursuers behind him, and the sounds of sentry whistles and clappers rang throughout the palace grounds. Chuaning glanced back to see 4, maybe 5 separate groups of lanterns stream out from the main alleys to gather into one, like a hissing snake formed of fire coming after them. Rongju's face was practically glowing with glee as he chased after Moran and Chuaning with all that he had in that frail body of his, weak from all the hardships and abuse he had suffered in the past, running like a famished jackal chasing after its prey. Thinking that finding them out first and turning them in had earned him a great credit, and drunk on the feeling of accomplishment, he unexpectedly muttered a commanding aura. Catch them! Catch that intruding live person! His arm was suddenly grabbed as he was running. Rongju whipped around angrily, faltering when he saw that it was the captain of the soldiers who had caught him before, but still snapped indignantly. What are you grabbing me for? Hurry and go catch that person up ahead! Sure, they're escapees, but aren't you one as well? The captain narrowed his eyes, looking at him maliciously. Alarmed, Rongju shot back. I only ran because I wanted to help the 4th Lord catch them. I was the one who found the live person. I was the one who found out that Mo Wei Yu isn't a ghost. Don't you even think about capturing me just to steal my credit in front of the 4th Lord? The captain was a little taken aback at first, before he put 2 and 2 together and burst out laughing instead. You found him first? Credit? Haha, me stealing your credit? The laughter stopped abruptly. Are you so desperate for distinction that you've gone mad trying? The 4th Lord himself was the one who discovered that live person. Did you think he'd steal the entire Away Palace off with a barrier just to catch some random little ghost? Ha! Stealing credit indeed. You must be blind trying to steal the 4th Lord's credit. Rongju stumbled in shock and fell to the ground. He watched as the army of ghost soldiers stomped past him in pursuit of Moran and Chuaning. Rongju trembled, lips quivering as he muttered, Already discovered? The Ghost King already saw through them himself? I'm not the first? No credit? Those visions of riches and fame, of being revered and admired by people lining the streets, came crashing down to the ground and was crushed underfoot by the army stampeding past all around him. Rongju stared blankly for a while before suddenly flying into a crazed frenzy, trying with every fiber of his being to struggle free. His frail body was like that of a mayfly, slowly yet unwilling to bend to fate, a moth flying into a flame. His life had never been easy. All he ever knew was a bed, men, wealthy madams, guests that came and went. A windowless little room filled with scented haze from a brass incense burner, where it was impossible to tell day from night. That was his whole life. It was a dark, never-ending night. He wanted to see daybreak. For the sake of that daybreak, that chance of living, that tiny bit of hope, he was willing to give up his dignity, his body, his honor, his kindness, his conscience. These were all that he had. Flying into the flame for that tiny bit of light. Wait for me! Chu Xianjun, save me! Seize this escapee. Once this is squared away, have him sent to the 4th Lord himself for interrogation. No! Rongju's pale, bloodless fingers clawed at the ground, his hair coming loose into a disheveled mess in the struggle, and that charming, lovely face looking eerily terrifying in the cold light of the moon. His eyes bulged outward as he screamed incoherently, "No, Chu Xianjun, save me!" After a while, began shrieking hysterically, "I was the one who found him first! I found the live person, me! You can't treat me like this! You never would have found them if not for me! You all just want to steal my reward, my credit!" He was dragged away, and his crazed shrieks were soon drowned out by the rumble of footsteps. Author's notes. They'll escape the ghost realm tomorrow. As for Rongju, I won't be writing him an ending. He didn't have anyone to be his guiding light on his path of desperation, and he lacked the opportunities to do good, so he ended up here. Those who feel for him, you can come up with interactions between him and the 4th Ghost King after he's been dragged away. Why don't I add a crack mini-theater today? Ghost Prison Guard A. My king! We caught one trying to run away on his own! We've brought him here for you. 4th Ghost King. In the middle of eating, lard and soy sauce rice may be simple, but it's really tasty. Ghost Prison Guard A. My king! Stop eating! You'll be a half-moon! 4th Ghost King. Burp. Angrily smashes bowl. Fat! This king is 30! Mighty! Do you understand? Rongju. I don't want my soul to be scattered. I want to be promoted and prosper. The way I see it, my king isn't sturdy or mighty enough. How light is my king? If you want to be sturdy and mighty, it's only right if your arm is as thick as a thigh and your leg as thick as a waist. Why not my king eat a little more? System notification. Player Rongju has acquired the correct way of licking orange tabby 4th Ghost King's boots. End of chapter 118. So to recap, Rongju decides that he's gonna rat Moran and Chuaning out because he discovered that Moran is a living human, and he believes that if he rats them out, he can get promoted, and he won't have to reincarnate, and he'll be able to live a cushy life. So he uses a diversion by stirring the flames of Chuaning's jealousy by implying that Moran was still committing debaucherous acts, indulging in debauchery even after confessing to Chuaning that he had it. And so Chuaning is really jealous. He's drinking jars of vinegar right now and decides to interrogate Moran, even beating him up. Poor Moran. He has no idea what's going on. And Rongju uses that opportunity to escape and get the attention of the guards to tell them that he found the intruders. But unfortunately for Rongju, he didn't know that the 4th Ghost King already knew that Moran was a living human and that everyone was actually already looking for them. And so the guards were like, didn't you also run away? We're gonna have to take you back and have the 4th Ghost King interrogate you himself. And it looks like, according to Meatbun's author's note, that's the end of Rongju's story. We don't really know what happens to him after that. Either he has his soul scattered, or maybe the 4th Ghost King will take a liking to him, and maybe he'll get to live a bit of luxury as one of his concubines. Either way, Rongju does have a pitiful past. He never lived a good life while he was alive, and he's not living a good life in death either. However, he also has his vices, and he also he bit the hand that fed him. Moran and Chuaning were offering to help him escape, and he decided to only think about himself and rat them out, and then he ended up making things worse for himself. So it's kind of hard to sympathize with him in this situation. But yeah, also, I just feel really bad for Moran, because I feel like I don't understand why Chuaning would believe Rongju, who he's only met right now, compared to Moran, who he's known for years. Like, even on principle, Chuaning should take his disciple's side over some stranger, right? Like, I know that Chuaning is jealous, so he's letting his emotions guide him, but I feel like you should trust someone that you know longer than someone that you just met. It doesn't make sense that he would trust the words of Rongju over his own disciple, you know? Especially when Moran went through all the trouble and, you know, risked his life to come save Chuaning. Like, that's gotta mean something, right? Anyway, let's continue on with the next chapter. Chapter 119, Shizun's Four Souls Assembled. Chuaning hadn't heard what Rongju was shouting back there, but based on the current situation, he didn't need any explanation to realize that Rongju had been purposely trying to provoke him back at the warehouse, to make him angry so Rongju could catch an opportune moment to escape and snitch. Chuaning was the sort of person who would normally think things through in a rational manner, no matter the situation, but when it came to situations involving Moran, all his rationality and calm seemed to have disappeared into thin air. He was somewhat flabbergasted to realize just how easily he'd been hoodwinked by a few words from a sissy like that. Exactly, Chuaning, you lost your cool! He watched Moran, who was running a few paces ahead of him, and asked in spite of himself, "Did you ever go back to Immortal Peach Pavilion after?" Having abruptly heard the name he himself had almost forgotten, Moran staggered and yelled furious, "Rongju, that dirty bastard! Did he say I went back to Immortal Peach Pavilion after? Why would I? Shizun, are you mad at me for this? Because he said I lied to you? ... After the whole thing at the platform of Sin and Virtue, I never went back to those kinds of places. I wouldn't lie to Shizun. If Shizun doesn't believe me, then you can use Jiangui to bind me and interrogate me." No need. Chuaning dropped his gaze, seeing that Jiangui was still tightly gripped in his hand. Thinking about how he had just injected spiritual powers into the willow vine to whip Moran into a bloody mess without cure or reason, that really had been... Wait, holy weapon? Jiangui's flames illuminated his complexion, bright against the darkness of the night. Chuaning stared at it for a moment, his mind tossing and turning frantically. He tried reversing the flow of the spiritual powers injected within Jiangui into the heart of his palm, and instantly felt a powerful and abundant power incessantly rushing in. Suddenly, Chuaning knew where he could draw spiritual power from. While spiritual powers could not flow between the living and the dead, the powers of a holy weapon didn't care whether the wielder was a human, ghost, god, or demon. As long as the weapon itself accepted, then it'd all be connected. Moran ran on for a while before he realized that Chuaning had stopped. He immediately turned back and asked anxiously, "Shizun, what is it?" The lash wound on his face was still bleeding, and with those bright black eyes, he looked all the more pitiful. Chuaning pursed his lips, feeling somewhat chagrined and a little pained. Although he felt like he really had wronged Moran, his inner pride pointed out that Moran really had entangled himself with the likes of Rongju in the past, so that lash had not been undeserved. But Shizun, you lashed him back then at the platform of Sin and Virtue, so he didn't deserve to get lashed again for the same crime, essentially, right? After a moment of contemplation, Chuaning didn't know what tone he should take or what expression to face him with either, so he could only go with the simple route of speaking with no emotions and no expression. "Moran, stop and retreat back to the palace walls." "To do what?" Chuaning replied flatly, "I'll show you a trick." ... Before he could wrap his head around his Shizun's words, Moran saw the red light of Jiangui flowing endlessly into Chuaning's remnant soul, enveloping his spirit with a blanket of flames. Moran's eyes widened as he watched Chuaning and Jiangui respond to each other. Suddenly, the flames abruptly vanished. The man garbed in golden and red robes raised the willow vine, hissing with threads of flames, and turned his head to address Moran. "Moran, give Jiangui an order." Moran could vaguely guess what he planned to do now, though he could hardly believe it. He promptly shouted a command. "Jiangui, Heed Shizun's orders as you would mine! The willow vine in Chuaning's hand crackled through, then erupted into strings of crystal red sparks as the leaves of the vine glowed brilliantly. Chuaning raised his other hand and brushed the tips of his fingers inch by inch over Jiangui, the willow vine coursing with even brighter radiance in the wake of his touch. The thousands of ghost soldiers were closing in now, and behind them the barrier-sealed palace walls stood sky-high. There was nowhere to run to. But then, Chuaning wasn't planning to run. A flicker of light caught in his eyes and rippled out, and a tempest suddenly roared into life out of nowhere. Chuaning's ropes danced in the gale as he held the willow vine up high and whipped it ferociously through the air, Jiangui striking out like a soaring dragon, glowing golden, resplendent, illuminating the whole night sky. With Moran's command, Jiangui no longer rejected Chuaning, and instead channeled its abundant spiritual energy ceaselessly into Chuaning's earth soul. Chuaning's eyes shone with that blinding brilliance, and his voice was deep and steady as he said, "Jiangui, 10,000 coffins." Rumble! In that split second, countless streaks of interlacing gold and red willow vines erupted from the earth, lacerating the magnificent palace hall into chunks of broken shingles and scrapes of bricks. One thick and powerful ancient vine feathered those ghost soldiers together and dragged them to the center of the willow vine, locking them down tight. Moran watched in shock as all of this happened before his eyes, seeing the holy weapon and the remnant soul work in concert, emerging as one. Seeing Chuaning's robes flutter, his jet black hair like smoking clouds. In life and in death, his spirit had always been so earth-shatteringly blazing and unstoppable. Taking advantage of this good opportunity, Chuaning resolutely swept to the back, placing his hand on the palace wall. It only took a second with his eyes closed before he immediately discerned the weak point of the barrier. Upward 9 feet, 4 inches to the right, use fire to attack. Moran immediately followed his instructions and jumped up, and before any of the ghosts within the away palace had time to react, the blazing fire spell was already forming in his palms as he slammed it down right in the spot Chuaning pointed out. In an instant, the earth rumbled and the mountains shook. The sky-high palace walls rapidly disintegrated, returning to the height they used to be, and the barrier seal all around also abruptly shattered, crumbling into dust. Go! There was no need to say that a second time. Moran hopped onto the top of the wall, then turned around to pull Chuaning, who was following behind up along with him. The two of them broke out from the fourth Ghost King's away palace, their figures swift as they rapidly disappeared into the boundless night. In a small and narrow alleyway, Chuaning and Moran each leaned against the side of a wall, both of them staring at each other, neither saying a word. In the end, it was Moran who couldn't hold back and snickered first. That old Ghost King will probably be furious to death. Hiss! The moment he drew back the corners of his mouth, it pulled the injury on his cheeks. Stop laughing, Chuaning said. And so Moran stopped laughing. In the dim alley, his lashes flickered, his pitch-black and gentle eyes gazing at the other. Shizun, are you still mad at me? If he had said, Shizun, haven't you wronged me? Chuaning might not have appreciated it, but instead he had asked whether he was still mad. Chuaning wavered for a moment, then silently danced away this subject. Hurry and cast the spell. We just escaped from the fourth Ghost King's away palace. He might not have the face to tell it to the other Ghost Kings for the moment, but the longer this drags on, it'll be harder to say. The moment Moran heard those words, he knew Chuaning wasn't leaving anymore, that he wasn't going to disappear. And so, the heart that had been strung high all this time was finally able to relax. Moran couldn't help but start to grin again. But the more he smiled, the more it hurt, and he unconsciously covered his cheek with his hand. Chuaning, ... Moran brought out the soul-calling lantern. He held it up with his hands and bowed his head as he recited the spell in his mind. After 3 repetitions, a blinding brilliance suddenly flashed from the soul-calling lantern, so bright that neither of them could open their eyes. He could vaguely hear the voice of Master Huaizui chanting, carried over from across the roaring waters of the land of the dead, carried over unceasingly past the quiet and peaceful river of forgetfulness. The time to return! The time to return! That voice was very distant, almost difficult to discern, but after a while the chanting of the time to return seemed to have come closer. Then the voice of Master Huaizui rang in Moran's ears. Why are there 2 Earth Souls? There was a trace of concern in Master Huaizui's obscure voice. Moran closed his eyes and told Huaizui everything that had transpired. That faint voice was quiet for a moment. You've met Chu Shun of Tailwind Hall? Master? It's nothing. Since Chu Gongzi said having 2 earth souls is normal, then it should be thus, Huaizui said. Only, this humble monk has never attempted to call back 2 earth souls from the ghost realm at the same time before, so this might take a bit longer. I will trouble Mo Shizu to wait for a moment. Moran glanced at the 4th King's Away Palace and asked, How much longer? We just came out from the 4th Ghost King's Away Palace. I don't know when they'll catch up to us. Not too long, rest assured, Mo Shizu. The moment Huaizui dropped these words, his voice faded even more, and after a while, it was overtaken completely by the sound of the time to return chanting. Chuaning couldn't hear Huaizui's voice, so his brows were slightly furrowed. What's going on? Shizun's souls are unique. Master said we'll need to wait for a bit, Moran explained. It's too close to the Away Palace here. Let's go further away. Chuaning nodded, and the two walked until they came to a turning corner. By then, the skies were beginning to lighten up, and the old man who had pointed the way before was just preparing to pack up his stall. When he spotted Moran, he ayyahed and appeared quite astonished. You found him? Moran didn't expect to bump into him again and was taken aback for a moment. Then he replied, Yes, I did. Thanks so much, uncle. What's there to thank? It's little Xianjun's own good luck, i.e., your face is scratched. Oh, it's a whipping from the ghost soldiers, Moran said, making up a reason. No wonder. I was gonna say, nothing average can harm a ghost. Sigh, how painful it must be. The old uncle pondered for a moment, then put down the drawer he had packed away and cooked 2 bowls of small wontons, handing them to the two. There's only the leftovers that I couldn't sell today. My treat. Eat some before you leave. Moran thanked the old man, then watched him off as he left, languidly carrying his stall load. Chuaning didn't like to eat scallions and chives, and the old man's wonton soup had been peppered with scallion. Moran picked out all the scallions in his bowl before exchanging it with Chuaning's. Shizun, why don't you eat this one? ... Chuaning sent him a look but didn't decline, and picked up the spoon to taste the food carefully. Moran watched him eat, the ice-cold soup of the underworld touching his lightly colored lips, neither the wontons nor the soup diminishing, the way actual ghosts ate. Is it good? It's all right. Not as good as the wontons you make. Real smooth, Moran. Chuaning choked, taken by surprise. He looked up abruptly to stare dumbfoundedly at the grinning man sitting before him, cheeks propped up on his hands. Suddenly, he felt like he was a river mussel whose shell had been forcibly pulled open, left exposed under the sun without a single secret left. What wontons? Yu Hung Elder knitted his brows, his expression stern, attempting to be ignorant to conceal his teacher's dignity that had now been spilled all over the floor. There's no need to hide it anymore. But before that dropped dignity could be picked up, it was shattered into pieces by Moran's hand, extending out to caress his hair. Chuaning was both furious and very dismayed over this. I know everything now. ... Moran took the lantern holding the human soul out from the Qiankun pouch and placed it beside the stone bench. Shizun was awkward when alive, and after coming to the underworld, it's still only the human soul that's honest. I made them for you, but it was only... Moran cocked a brow and continued gazing at him with a faint smile. But it was only what? Only because I felt bad? Because I didn't want you to starve? Because I regretted? Those were all words he could never say out loud. Chuaning thought his own heart had an unspeakable affliction. He'd always had a pride much stronger than normal people, taking being good to someone, loving someone, and being attached to someone to be shameful things. Having lived through the storms of years past, he'd become used to being alone, had become a stern and solitary tree, reaching up to the sky. A great tree like this didn't have branches that quivered like flowers, stirring affection in people's hearts, nor did it sway with the wind like strings of vines, seductive and enticing. He only stood there in silence and severity, very steady and dependable, blocking wind and rain for the passerby without a word, allowing those under the tree to hide from the scorching sun. Perhaps it was because he'd grown too tall, too luxuriant, that people had to intentionally look up before they'd discover, so this gentle shade had been bestowed by him. But all those travelers going to and fro, not one of them had looked up, and not one of them had ever noticed him. After all, people's lines of sight were habitually aimed at places lower than themselves, or at eye level at most, and so, Chuaning had gradually grown accustomed to this, so accustomed that it had become second nature to him to expect it. But there was actually no one in the world who was born reliant or relied upon. Only those who always sought the connection of those who were strong would become more and more charming, more and more sweet, limbering their boneless body to curry favor, charm, to use sweet words to win the world. And the other type of person was someone like Chuaning. Ever since he had emerged from the mountain, he'd always been the one depended on. People like him would only become more and more steadfast, more and more strong, until in the end, even the face had become iron, the heart steel. People like him were used to seeing others be vulnerable and incompetent. They had seen all there was to see of charm and sweetness, and so they refused to reveal even a morsel of weakness. They were people who wielded swords, always standing at the ready in full armor. They couldn't show any weakness, and knew nothing of tenderness. After so long, it was as if it'd been forgotten that everyone had once been born with emotions and affections, both strong and soft, that every person had, as a child, known how to cry and laugh, known how to stand up after having fallen, while also desiring for a pair of arms to help them up. Maybe he had hoped, once upon a time, hoped that someone would come to help him up. But he'd waited once and there had been nothing. A second time and there had still been nothing. After getting disappointed time and time again, he'd gradually grown accustomed to it. By the time someone finally did come to help him up, he no longer thought it was necessary and only felt as something shameful. It was only a trip and a fall. It wasn't like he'd broken his leg. There's no need to be melodramatic about it. And what if he had broken his leg? People like this would only think, oh, it's only a broken leg. It wasn't like he died. There's no reason to be melodramatic about it. And what if he died? Even as a ghost, he'd think, well, since I'm dead anyway, there's no reason to be melodramatic about it. People like him put so much effort into breaking away from the pitfalls of this kind of melodrama, but unbeknownst to them, they would fall into another type of pitfall, a kind of prideful illness that was incurable. Moran stared at this incurable person, waiting to see what he would say. In the end, Chuaning didn't say anything, only pressing his lips together, dryly putting the spoon down. He was very unhappy. Thus, half a moment later, he stood up abruptly and said, "Try casting the spell again. I want to enter the soul-calling lantern." Huh? Moran blinked for a second, then laughed. Is the soul-calling lantern a conch shell? A place where you can go hide when you get embarrassed? Chuaning's expression was stern and solemn, and he shook out his sleeves as he said, "Embarrassed? Why don't you tell me what reason I have to be embarrassed?" Of course Shizun is embarrassed because... Chuaning hadn't expected Moran would actually be thick-skinned enough to say it, and feeling like he'd been prickled by a needle, he exclaimed angrily, "Shut your mouth." Because Shizun is good to me. ... Moran now rose to his feet too. The red clouds of the ghost realm drifted past the sky, hiding the dreary crescent moon that was peeking its head out, splashing the ground with a layer of fresh frost and illuminating Moran's face. He wasn't laughing anymore. His expression was solemn and sincere. "Shizun, I know you're good to me. I don't know if you'll still remember the things I say after your souls have returned, but no matter what, I still want to tell you. From now on, you're one of the most important people in the world to me. This disciple has done many absurd deeds in the past, and my heart had been filled with grudge and hate, even though I clearly had the best Shizun in the world. Now, when I think back on it, I'm only filled with infinite regret." Chuaning watched him. "Shizun is the best Shizun, and this disciple is the worst disciple," Moran said. Chuaning had been feeling a little uneasy at first, but as he listened to Moran using his sad and pathetic vocabulary to try and express himself, doing his utmost but still so clumsy, Chuaning tried to resist, but in the end, he couldn't hold back a faint smile. "Oh," he nodded and repeated. "Oh, okay, no, this is Shizun speaking? Okay. Oh," he nodded and repeated. "Shizun is the best Shizun, and the disciple is the worst disciple. At least you finally got some self-awareness." Chuaning wasn't a greedy person. He gave a lot to others, but had always asked for very little for himself. Although he wasn't receiving Moran's love, to become one of the most important people to Moran, to be the best Shizun, that wasn't bad either. He had always been impoverished when it came to feelings anyway, poor yet refusing to beg for more. And here was someone willing to give him a small piece of hot flatbread to munch on. He felt very happy, munching on the flatbread in small bites, and that was enough for him. This dummy Moran, on the other hand, when he saw dumbfoundedly that he was able to cause this piece of soul to smile as well, his heart swelled with inexplicable joy. Shizun, you should smile more. You look prettier with a smile than without. Instead, Chuaning ceased to smile. Oh, he got embarrassed. This prideful disease of his, it made him think looking pretty was the praise only wild weeds the likes of Rongju got when they flirted, and he didn't want it. But Moran, with his poor judgment, was still trying agonizingly to praise his good Shizun. Shizun, do you know? When you smile, how can I describe it? He was working hard trying to think of a phrase that could best describe the beauty of the scene he just witnessed. Something that was related to smiles. The watchman's rattle of the underworld clapped thrice again. Inspiration struck and he blurted, "That's right! It's a smile in the netherworld!" The idiom means to die happy with no regrets, but Moran took it literally. So he's saying that Shizun's smile is to die for. Okay. ... Chuaning was genuinely mad now, and he refused to pay Moran any mind, abruptly pulling his own sleeve aside to pick up the soul-calling lantern. He scolded sternly, "Mo wei yu. All this blabbering and you still can't cast the spell? If you say one more rubbish word, I will go back to that fourth Ghost King's palace myself, which would be infinitely better than returning to the mortal realm to listen to your nonsense all day." Oh, he's just embarrassed. Our poor Chuaning is just embarrassed. He doesn't know how to take a compliment, and Moran isn't really good at dishing compliments either. Moran was dumbfounded. Smile in the netherworld? Had he used it wrongly? Having an especially pretty smile in the underworld, it's not wrong. Disputing on the road was somewhat ostentatious after all. Moran had no idea what he'd said wrong, but if Shizun had told him to shut it, then he'll just shut his mouth. Thinking this, Moran scratched his head and dragged Chuaning to a corner. At this time, that languid chanting in his mind had gradually grown louder and louder. Moran ventured to ask Huaizui, "Master, are you almost ready?" It was quiet for a moment on the other side. Then the knocking sound of a wooden fish came, and Huaizui's voice seemed to be right next to his ears, becoming eminently clear. Almost. Huaizui's voice had only just dropped when dots of golden light started to diffuse out of Chuaning's second earth soul, and the soul that was standing grew fainter and fainter as the golden light scattered until finally it shattered into millions of streaming fireflies, flowing into the soul lamp like the Milky Way. Moran could hear the voice of Master Huaizui chanting, carried over from across the roaring waters of the land of the dead, carried over unceasingly past the quiet and peaceful river of forgetfulness. The time to return. The time to return. All sufferings were gradually washed to a faded white in the size of the Buddhist chanting, seemingly distant yet close. Moran hugged that soul-calling lantern, feeling his body becoming lighter and lighter, emptier and emptier. Ko! One crisp sound of the wooden fish. It was like a sharp knife, brutally shattering the trance-like recitation. Moran snapped open his eyes, looking like he was jolted awake. Everything from the ghost realm had vanished, like he had only just awoken from a long dream. He found that he was lying on a bamboo raft, moored by the Naihei Bridge of Sisheng Peak, the waters beneath the bamboo strips lapping ceaselessly, splashing about. The sky was crab-shell blue, but dyed with a touch of pale red. The bamboo leaves along the shores of the great river danced in the air, the thousand whispers of their millions of leaves tender in the air. It seemed that dawn was about to break. He blinked dazedly. Suddenly, he discovered the soul-calling lantern that had been in his arms was gone, and this scared him out of his wits, and he jolted upright in a rush. "Shizun!" "Don't yell." A voice, impassive. Moran panted, looking like someone who had just experienced a nightmare. His face was pale as he turned his head and saw Huaizui kneeling in proper pose on the shore, knocking on the wooden fish placed upon a verdant rock, his eyes open. "Even if you yell, he won't hear it right now." The soul-calling lantern rested next to the wooden fish, radiating with streaming light, glowing and magnificent. The force of Chuaning's soul was indescribably beautiful. Huaizui picked up the soul-calling lantern and rose to his feet from the boulder, nodding towards Moran. Young Mo Shizu, you've done very well. Moran quickly crawled up to stand, hopped onto land from the bamboo raft. He tugged on Huaizui and questioned anxiously. Master, let's go find Shizun's mortal body in Frost Sky Hall. Let's go. I'm scared if we're late, the souls will disperse again. Huaizui couldn't hold back a chuckle. How can the souls disperse so easily? Then he added, don't worry, this humble monk has already sent Shui Shizu to speak with your esteemed sect leader. Chuaning's mortal body should now be on its way to the Red Lotus Pavilion. This humble monk will be going into seclusion there to perform the rite to have the souls of your Shizun be transferred once again into the body. Moran urged, then let's go, quickly! When he saw Huaizui's faint smile, he hastily added, Master, do take your time, no rush! But his brows were obviously furrowed, his feet making strides unconsciously, and he almost wanted to reach out to pull on Huaizui's sleeves, looking nothing like there was no rush. Huaizui shook his head, sighed, and said with a smile, there's no point in the young Shizu being impatient. Moran waved his hands. No rush, steady is best. Indeed, steadiness is important. When souls leave the body, they cannot immediately return to the flesh, otherwise it'd be going against the laws of heaven, causing the souls to dissipate. Naturally, this humble monk will go slowly. Right. Good. Do it slowly. Moran acquiesced incessantly, but still couldn't hold back, and asked very carefully after some hesitation, then, how long will it take before Shizun comes back to life? Huaizui was very calm. 5 years. I see. 5 years is good. 5 years? Color drained completely from Moran's face, and he felt like he was choking. 5 years at the shortest. Moran, ... Author's notes. When Shizun officially wakes up, the Moran you'll see is 2.0 Moran. Bring it on. Prepare for system upgrade. Thank you, Meatbun, for letting us know. Okay, so to recap chapter 119, Moran had given Shizun his Jangui to whip him in order to quell Chuaning's anger against him, but then Shizun realized that he could resonate with Jangui and use it to break the barrier, so he does, and they're able to escape from the 4th Ghost King's away palace. And Moran is able to get back in contact with Master Huaizui, and Master Huaizui needs some time to finish the preparations to call them back. So Moran and Chuaning stop by the old man's wonton stall and eat some wontons, and Moran reveals to Chuaning that he knows that Chuaning was the one that made him those chili oil wontons back then. And of course, Chuaning is really embarrassed, but he's in a good mood, he's feeling generous, and so he gives Moran a small, faint smile, and Moran is dumbstruck. He is in awe. He's like, wow, Shizun is so pretty. When you smile, your smile lights up my life. Your smile is to die for. Which then, his wording isn't the best, and Chuaning gets offended and ends up becoming a tsundere again and shutting him off. And Moran's like, what did I do wrong? I may not be eloquent in words, but my actions, I believe my actions tell how I truly feel. Shizun, you're so pretty when you smile. So Chuaning is embarrassed because he didn't want Moran to know about his affections toward him, and so he closes up and quickly goes back into the lantern. And so Master Huaizui is able to call them back, and now they're back in the mortal realm. All 4 pieces of Chuaning's soul is in the soul calling lantern, and Moran's like, okay, that's great. Let's go and bring the souls back to Chuaning's body. How long will it take for Shizun to wake up? And Master Huaizui says, 5 years, at the least. So good luck, Moran. Shizun is back, but not quite yet. You're gonna have to wait 5 more years before he wakes up. But thank you, Meatbun, for letting us know that when Shizun wakes up, he will be faced with the love and adoration of Moran 2.0. Let's get it. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed today's read along, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!